The Chinese Communist Party doesn't want you to watch this video. But are they controlling YouTube? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The Chinese Communist Party has been very successful at censoring Americans, even inside America, usually by leveraging corporate interests that want to do business in China. From the NBA banning Americans protesting in support of Hong Kong, to Zoom sending American user data to the Chinese government, to CBS censoring its own shows for criticizing censorship in China. Yeah, that was ironic. Sorry, I meant tragic. But what about Google? Google has been trying to get back into the China market for years. It tried to secretly create a censored search app for the Chinese Communist Party. One US general has said that Google's work in China is benefiting China's military. So what does that mean for YouTube, which is owned by Google, and for channels on YouTube that talk about China in ways the Chinese Communist Party might not like? Joining me today to talk about that is Matt Tai, better known as Laowhy86, who runs his own YouTube channel on China. Matt, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thank you so much, Chris.
So in a recent video, you suggest YouTube may be compromised by the CCP. Why do you think that?
Well, I've had a really big problem between all three of our channels. I mean, I run Laowhy86, which is my own. I run ADV China together with Winston over on Serpent ZA. And then, we collab on each other's channels all the time. Also, we run the ADV podcast, and all of them are surrounding, China content, China-based content, particularly recently about the Chinese government. And although we've had videos demonetized or suggested for limited ads, basically, it's their nice way of saying it, we've had a recent problem where videos are getting manually reviewed. So what that means is in the past, YouTube kind of decides, okay, this video is, limited ads. You're not going to get monetization on this, and there's nothing you could do about it. But so many people complain, and they kind of change the way they do things to be more transparent about why you're not getting ads or how they came up with that decision. And what they suggest now is that you upload your videos ahead of time so that they can actually have a physical reviewer. Now, I don't know if this works on smaller channels, but on bigger channels, they'll have a physical person, a real human being, to watch your video and say, this is okay, so that it won't get affected in the future. It can't get flagged, it won't get, taken down. It's already manually reviewed by YouTube. So what's recently been happening, and I have three concrete examples. On my video on Laowhy86, I made a video called Taiwan as a Country, even if you wish it really wasn't. And basically what happened was it was manually reviewed by a human being as being totally fine. So I was getting ads on it. And then all of a sudden, it was again demonetized. It was demonetized after it had been manually reviewed. So I was very confused because when I went into this new transparent YouTube system about how they kind of come up with this conclusion, it said that that video had been demonetized because of video game violence. Now, my channel has nothing to do with video games, obviously. I wasn't playing like a Taiwan video game simulator in GTA 5 or anything. This had nothing to do with actually what the content was about. So I was very confused. I went on to the live chat on YouTube, and of course they bumped me up to their internal team, the good old YouTube internal team, which they looked at the video and quite quickly said, oh yeah, it's totally fine. Like, congratulations, good news, your video is monetized again. And that got me thinking, why not pursue this and see what their decision-making process was? So I said, what's going on? Was it flagged? What was the decision-making process that made this originally fine, but then another manual reviewer came in and said it's not fine? And they just completely avoided they avoided that conversation and said, yeah, thanks for your cooperation, thanks for your feedback, that's great, There was no transparency involved. So they've effectively made this transparent system to say that your videos, are monetized or demonetized for a reason, but then they won't actually tell you that reason, even after it's already been falsely accused is something that it's not.
What are the consequences of a demonetized video for you?
So this is something I think YouTube likes to deny. They like to say that the monetization of a video has nothing to do with its performance, right? The thing is, when a video gets demonetized across all 3 of our channels, or all 4 of our channels actually, what we'll see is that the performance of a video will spike when it's monetized, and it will be very stable. It won't really grow if it's demonetized, if it has that yellow check mark. And that's just our evidence, like on our end, but I've also heard other channels, for example, I heard something from Ethan Klein on the H3 podcast talk about how they've proven that basically you can watch the spike of the graph. If a video gets demonetized like halfway through its life, it will stop getting views basically. There's no incentive for YouTube to want to recommend content that isn't making them money. Especially if it's content that's getting falsely flagged for reasons that they might perceive as being offensive, or they don't want to offend their audience, right? So if YouTube is caught recommending a content that someone might deem offensive, according to all the flags that they're getting, then at the end of the day, YouTube might be complicit in that content.
And so you think how you got flagged for video game violence, that was something somebody purposely did?
So this is my theory is that if you go onto the Chinese side of the internet, on the other side of the Great Firewall of China, if you are searching things in Chinese, you can find forums about both me and Serpent ZA. And there's entire basically walkthroughs. And there's thousands of pages of this stuff, but walkthroughs on how to use a VPN, get on a VPN, go to YouTube, find our content. I saw your content on there, Chris, as well.
Oh, good.
To go on, yeah, of course, to go on our content and then to flag it for different reasons, how to actually flag it, how to change your browser into Chinese when you go to YouTube, how to do all these things. And the reason being is that there are voluntary wumaos, voluntary 50-cent armies that would like to, take our content down. And this is one of the only ways they can, conceive of doing this. Now, I've also found Western YouTubers, American YouTubers doing the exact same thing, following that same playbook, showing how to go onto all of our content and flag us as this and this and this, whether it's for racism, whether it's for bullying, whether it's for harassment, video game violence, whatever. What I think happened, and this is what happened on our ADV China video for the Tiananmen Square monument that we visited and paid tribute to, is that they found that maybe the YouTube reviewers are very lax on the whole video game violence thing. Maybe they'll just say, yeah, it's video game violence because there's a ton of that out on YouTube, and just kind of, oh, whatever, yeah, that's demonetized after it's been flagged for that reasoning. Or the other theory is that there's someone in there that's constantly getting flags on our content, because we know that that's happening, right? We know that, for example, on one of Serpent ZA's video, he did a video on the century of humiliation. And that's kind of what spurned the whole tutorial thing. So we know that basically they'll find any reason to report a video. In that case, it was an old man who walked into the camera, like into the shot, and then they flagged that for bullying an old man. The video is completely removed. Now, in that case, it wasn't even demonetized, it was just removed. So we think that there's probably either someone someone sympathetic to that within the YouTube moderation sphere, which, that idea is really difficult to prove. But at the same time, how can somebody whose job is to manually sit down and watch a video say, yes, this has been flagged for video game violence, and yes, I'm going to approve this, right? Certainly that's all traceable within Google. This is the people who will moderate. There's a trail, there's a paper trail, right, of the moderators that are actually flagging content. So it wouldn't be impossible to prove, but it would be impossible to prove without someone to, be able to go in there and look at the content and see who is moderating and why they clicked that.
And has YouTube responded in any way to your concerns?
No, so I put that video out in concern. I wanted to bring attention for people like yourself, people like Serpent ZA, people like me. I wanted people to understand that this is different than a normal video that someone might find offensive. This is potentially thousands and thousands of flags coming at these channels, which is going to do, whether they ignore them or not, it's going to do something in the whole zeitgeist of how the content system works, moderation system works in YouTube. If you're seeing constant barrages of flags on a certain type of content, eventually something's going to happen, and that we're starting to see that now. I'll admit that the whole mass demonetization has gotten a little bit better since they made the whole human moderation process a thing, but at the same time, now we're seeing people physically, actively okaying flags on these videos that are not, they're completely irrelevant to the content. And what we've noticed is that it's always on very, very sensitive topics. So if we look at the 3 concrete examples that I have, Taiwan as a country, Chairman Xi literally says, Taiwan is our most controversial issue. If we look at Tiananmen Square, the monument video, the video is literally called "The Chinese Government's Not Going to Like What We Found in the Desert." Very sensitive issue for China. The Century of Humiliation on Serpent Zade's video, incredibly sensitive issue. It's never stuff about, I don't know, maybe it's stuff that pokes fun or maybe satire. It's never that kind of stuff. It's always very, very cutting and very, very sensitive topics that get hit.
Well, in your video, you say the Chinese Communist Party is winning the propaganda war. Why do you say that?
Mm-hmm. I say the Chinese Communist Party is winning the propaganda war. I mean, partially I'm referring to the soft power that they put out there on YouTube. And what I mean by winning is that there's not a mass army of people in other countries that are reporting their content. To me, for someone that has actually been affected by the Communist Party of China and sees the absolute atrocities that they commit, for me, to see the Chinese government able to post freely on the Western internet to try and sway opinion in the Western world or in other countries, to me, that's offensive to me. But I'm not going out there reporting their content. And you're not finding thousands or millions of potential people getting paid or voluntarily going to report their content either. So when I say they're winning, they're actively using Western platforms and freedom of speech that they themselves ban in their own country to spread their own oppressive message. And I just find that kind of ironic because you have numbers on your side. So when someone like me or you or Winston tries to put out content and information and stuff that we truly believe about the Communist Party of China, and we get mass attacks and mass flags, not to mention the death threats and all that other kind of stuff that I'm sure you're very familiar with, they don't have to deal with that. Right. So from that aspect, they're winning. They have the platform and the tools to do that, the money to do that, and the audience to do that.
Why is the Chinese Communist Party so concerned about what YouTube shows have to say about China?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One thing that really bothers the Chinese Communist Party is that they're worried that when a Chinese person does in fact use a VPN, maybe it's an English savvy person, when they go over to the other side of the internet, they want to make sure that they have enough content for them to consume to confirm their internal bias, right? So we know how the Chinese brainwashing system works in the education system of Communist China. People are, if they're a little bit curious, I'm not talking about dissidents or anything, if they're a little bit curious and they want to hop over to the English-speaking internet or a place where they can freely express their opinions or consume other opinions, they want to make sure that there's enough domestic type media there. So you got CGTN, you have pro CCP Western YouTubers that are definitely a huge force right now in terms of attracting Chinese nationalist audiences on the other side of the internet. And they want to make sure that it's kind of a safe place. So it's just people like us, our dissenting voices are actually kind of drowned out in that whole mess. But there's also the other thing is that China has a huge prerogative to want to sway Western opinion to make its own system look good. So when you hear all of this news, let's say, or opinions from us about how oppressive, freedom of speech is, freedom of religion, and all these issues that China, has really horrible track record with. When you hear about all these things, but then you hear a ton of other opinions that kind of drown that out or kind of make that less reliable, and you see other people able to post on YouTube on these supposed websites that are blocked in China, Facebook and YouTube. But how do these people get away with it? How does this person walk around with a camera in China and just say whatever they like? It starts to create questioning in people's minds. And when you have mainstream media here in the US that really just preys on the insecurities of people and really likes to big up chaos and all kinds of, basically clickbait media. When you have this kind of zeitgeist, but then you see this bastion of stability that China likes to portray, it all of a sudden becomes a little bit more palatable, an authoritarian system like China. Number two, you have China's prerogative of just wanting to have soft power throughout the world, whether it's financially benefiting them or diplomatically as well. So it's not just Americans that are watching, the Chinese media stuff. It's not just their prerogative to. I'm trying to formulate here, but our channels for them are dangerous because it offers a differing opinion to something they dump millions and millions of dollars and man hours into trying to portray, right? It flies in the face of all that. So if we have a big enough audience, that's a big threat to their hegemony. It's a big threat to their influence.
So moving forward, what are you guys going to do?
I mean, honestly, like an interview like this, where we're talking about it openly, we're all in the same boat here. we'd like to see YouTube actually be a little bit more transparent. I'd like them to reach out to me, Winston, or you, and tell us why content is being flagged. I want to know is the content being flagged, what it's being flagged for, and why someone would manually review that content as something that it's not. I don't want to reply in this email chain to be like, oh, we thank you for your cooperation. I want to know why. When I ask why, I expect a reason why. As a content creator, we're putting our intellectual property, we're putting our ideas and hard work out there. I expect to know why something happened. I understand that you and Winston are using a platform that has community guidelines and rules, but those community guidelines and rules haven't been broken in these videos that I'm referring to. So I'd like them to not just say that they're being transparent with these new tools of human moderation, but giving concrete reasons as to why content is still being demonetized or removed.
Well, thanks for joining me today and sharing the story with us.
You're welcome, Chris. Thank you for having me.
So I think at this point it's pretty important to remind you to like and share this episode so more people can know about how the Chinese Communist Party is influencing what you can watch on YouTube. Also, coming out today is the 100th episode of the China Unscripted podcast. And I had both Matt from Laowhy86 and Winston from Serpent ZA on for an incredible interview. Check out the link below for that. I've also put a link to Matt's episode below. Be sure to check it out and subscribe to his channel as well. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.